some more content we have is that Miami has hired the Minnesota defensive coordinator, Corey Hetherman. Now, this marks 2 years in a row that a coordinator was hired away from the defensive coordinator, I believe, yeah, because Joe Rossi was hired to Michigan State 2 years ago.
Hmm.
Kirk Soraka was hired to Rutgers. This year, Corey Hetherman is hired to Miami, going outside the Big Ten down to Miami. Yes, they have deep pockets, but that is still a school that does not make nearly as much as the Big Ten does. And I mean, we can talk about the impact it has for Minnesota, and I do think there's a conversation there, but I do want to steer this in the direction of, does Minnesota have a problem, Zach? Because if you look at the numbers and how much they're paying their assistant coaches, it's not good. And it's
Hmm.
one of the reasons why I believe you're starting to see some of these coordinators leaving. So, Zach, if you want to maybe comment on, the loss of the defensive coordinator for Minnesota, and then we'll get into the discussion of the money, the financial stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just real quick, I think one of the things that I'm concerned about for Minnesota is, does Coy Parrish go somewhere else?
Hmm.
Because he's an uber, like, one of the best freshmen in the country, one of the best players in the country. He was, thinking about Ohio State before he stayed home at Minnesota. Does he start thinking, maybe the Buckeyes are the right team to go to now that my defensive coordinator's gone? Because like that defensive coordinator, Heatherman was really good for them this year. I mean, that defense was, we saw it against Virginia Tech. We saw it throughout the season. Minnesota was very good defensively. And I think this is a huge loss for Minnesota. And I think the biggest problem is we saw it, you've seen it at other schools. When you don't have stability with your coordinators, it really becomes difficult to continue to learn new systems year after year after year. And so, if anything else, like Heatherman did a good job, but just now all of your defensive players who have been there for a few years, you got to learn a third system in 3 years. Like, you could do it, but it's just you see the difference between that versus an Ohio State who's now been in Jim Knowles' system for 3 years and they can evolve it through like over time. So I think it's a big loss for longevity. I think Heatherman's a good coach. And I think it's going to be tough to get a good defensive coordinator to replace him.
Yeah, I mean they found Heatherman, so I'm sure they'll find somebody again. PJ Fleck has proven to be able to go out and make good hires from smaller situations, but to me, the biggest issue here is that Minnesota is just they're just not paying their coaches
Yeah.
enough to be able to retain them. Of all the Big Ten schools that submit how much they pay their coaches, which you don't have to if you're a private school. USC, Penn State, and Northwestern do not have to. But when you consider, and I'm getting some of this from Gopher Illustrated on 24/7, but when you consider how much James Franklin and Lincoln Riley are making, it's very fair to believe that Minnesota and Northwestern are the two schools that are at the bottom of paying their, not just their head coach but their assistant coach's salary out
Yeah.
there among everybody else. PJ Fleck has actually played rather or paid rather well, but his assistant coaches are not paid like it. And then you look at the rival schools. Iowa is paying $3 million more than
Yeah.
Minnesota is for their coaches. Wisconsin is paying almost $1 million more, 776,000. But we saw what happened with Wisconsin and Brett Bielema when Wisconsin refused to pay his assistant coaches more. He
Yep.
left and he went to
Yep.
Arkansas, a worse job where he was not going to be successful, but he felt like, at least here I can pay my assistant coaches and try to do something, because he was losing a bunch of assistant coaches because they weren't paying him well. So for me, like, I don't know, like, some Minnesota fans are going to get mad at me for this, and that's fine. Whatever, you can be mad at me, but I'm advocating for your fandom right
Yep.
now, that your school will get out of the gutter and go pay some assistant coaches. Stop acting like this is the old Big Ten where we're not making as much money as everybody else. The Big Ten Conference has the largest payout to their schools, especially now with Penn State making the semifinals, Ohio State making the semifinals, Indiana and Oregon making the playoffs. Like there are payouts for your conference that go to everybody else. And at some point, if you're not going to invest, and I'm not saying I want this to happen, I'm just being real. At some point, if schools are not going to invest in their football program and their coaches and everything else, there will be a time where they say, get out.
Yep.
Again, I'm not advocating for that. I don't want that to happen. But when Ohio State and Penn State and Oregon and all these other schools are bringing in money, eventually they're going to say, why are we keeping these freeloaders on?
Yep.
Because they're not making anything, and they're not paying anybody. They're just taking the money in, and they're not paying anybody. And so eventually you're going to find people say, which again I don't want to happen. You're just going to find them saying, why are they in this conference if they're not going to actually try to win with the money they're making? Am I being fair there, Zach? I'm not trying to be critical of the Minnesota fans. I do want the best for Minnesota fans. Like I think Minnesota fans should want this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I would be slow to think that they would like get kicked out of the conference. I think that's
obviously like worst case scenario.
Yeah,
but.
I think that's like a 20-year down the road.
Right.
Maybe 10. I don't know, but I'm not there yet. But I do think the point that I think you're making that I think can be backed up. USA Today has data of all the schools and the assistant pay combined for every school that is public. Here are some schools that have more, they pay more to their assistants than Minnesota. Oklahoma State, Big 12 school. NC State, ACC school. North Carolina, ACC school. Let's see. Indiana, Rutgers, Maryland, all Big Ten. Virginia Tech, ACC. Wisconsin.
Virginia Tech is so awful. They just destroyed them in their bowl game.
I know. And they have more. Wisconsin, Illinois, Texas Tech, Big 12 school.
That's ridiculous.
Mississippi State, who is awful right now. Yes. Georgia Tech, who's in the ACC. Yep. Like Kansas in the Big 12, Louisville in the ACC, Kansas State in the Big 12.
How much more does Kansas pay?
Kansas,
does it give you a number?
Yeah, Kansas, I believe, is somewhat comparable. They're at 4.8 million, and Minnesota's is right around 4.6. So but that Minnesota,
but still,
and
you shouldn't be on Kansas's level if you're a Big Ten team.
Yeah. Now, I think part of the problem is like UCLA is right around where Minnesota is too. So like there's precedent, but I think if you're Minnesota, what I say is I need to at least match Wisconsin. Like they're our rival. We need to match them. And Wisconsin, let me go back up here for a minute. Wisconsin, I believe, was paying. No, I bypassed it. Well,
I'll just say really fast before you get to that. Like, I'm not trying to like point at Minnesota here, because as you're pointing out, UCLA is doing this a little bit too. To me, and I understand UCLA a little bit because I don't think they're getting a full Big Ten payout. Yeah, so I understand that a little bit. Don't like it, don't agree with it, but I understand it a little bit. To me, like, I'm saying this to every school in the Big Ten that is refusing to put money into their football program. I am praising programs like Illinois and Indiana that have dumped more money into those programs. And granted, those programs have seen success lately, so that's one of the reasons why they're doing it. But it's not like Minnesota hasn't seen success. Minnesota had an 11-win season a few years ago. Like, you give PJ Fleck the money, he can make it happen. I get not a lot of people like him. They think he's goofy and stuff like that. I think he's got some quirks to him as well, but I find him kind of endearing at times as well. But, like, it's not like they have some bum coach who can't do anything. They got a coach that can do something. And you're not giving him money, and you're not putting money into your coaching staff. Like, to me, it's like, if not now, when?
Yeah. I would make the argument, and this might be a little overreach, but Utah's had a good run. They are in the Big 12 though, so they don't have the type of money from the conference, at least. but their assistant coach payout is 8.27, about $8.3 million for all their assistants. I don't think there should be a Big Ten school below that.
I agree.
And now that's taking into account that only a few are. Michigan is above that. Believe it or not, I don't think Oregon's not there yet, which is insane. But the reality is, if you're getting outpaced by a Big 12 school or even an ACC school, which Florida State outpaces them as well, which is hilarious because they're awful.
I understand like Florida State and Miami and some places like that,
Right.
because they have seen the success and they are vying for more right now. Like they're the ones out there that are saying like, we want more from the ACC because we are trying to funnel money into our program, right?
Yep.
So I do understand that a little bit, but go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and I think so. Utah is one of the they've made the right move in investing in their coaching staff, and these programs need to be similar to Utah, and they have the resources to do it, at least from the TV contracts and the payouts. And I like, if I'm the head coach, PJ Fleck or any of these programs, if I'm Dan Lanning, right? Like Dan Lanning, they pay their assistants really well. They're right around the same number as Utah. But if I'm these programs, I'm saying, hey, we are not below, $6 million minimum for our pool of assistants. And that's minimum, I think, bare minimum. But there's a lot that are below that. And I think the reality of where college football and what these coaches are worth, you got to try to retain them. And they're doing so much more work now than just X's and O's work. I mean, they're recruiting. They have to re-recruit their players every year. So like they deserve it from a compensation standpoint too. So I don't know why you don't, with the way the sport is changing and with the money that you're getting as a program.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. To me, it just, the amount of money you put into your program, it speaks to how much you care. And to me right now, I think it's sad for Minnesota fans that Minnesota, the university or program or whatever, is communicating to their fans they do not care. Mm-hmm. And we can bring up all the examples in the world about like, well, this team pays a high amount of money to their coaching staff and they're not very good. I bet the fans feel better that they care though. And guess what? Yep. They have seen success before. Maybe there's not success right now, but I guarantee a place that spends a lot of money on their coaching staffs has seen success before. You're not seeing a Kansas, paying $10+ million to their coaching staff. You're not seeing, name your other school that's been terrible for a long time, not pay money to their coaching staffs, because eventually, yes, you can get coaching hires wrong and stuff like that, but eventually you're going to hit the right one and it's going to do a lot for you. This Ohio State went through this.
Yep.
After Jim Tressel. Jim Tressel, great coach, but he was not paying his coaches anything, and it was really hard for him to hold on to his coaches. Urban Meyer comes in from an SEC school, and he says, you want me to hire coaches with this? And they were like, yeah. And he was like, not happening. You want me to come work here, you're going to have to pay more money. And Ohio State cared enough about their program to say, okay, we'll pay more money. So I don't know if this is just on the university. I don't know if this is on PJ Fleck, that it needs to get tougher with the university and say, I need more coaches or I need more, salary for my coaches. I don't know all the internal workings, but what I do know is that this Minnesota program has the opportunity to do more, but you're not going to do more if you keep losing coordinators every single year to an ACC school that you should be paying more money than.